Hi, I'm Asmo and today I have for you a beginner-friendly guide for the best way to level a monk in Path of Exile 2. I leveled many monk characters, speedrunning and racing with this class, and I optimized this strategy to keep it simple for new players while maximizing the speed and damage at all stages of leveling from level 1 to early maps. If you want to level a monk, I recommend you watch the entire video because I will be sharing the gem progression, the gearing and crafting priorities, as well as gameplay tips that will make the game easier for you, and at the end I will have an extra surprise for you. You don't need any gear or currency to follow this guide, and I will be explaining how to progress quickly on a completely fresh start and still destroy all the content, including the bosses. Your initial setup begins with engraving the Glacial Cascade and Frost Bomb with your level 1 gems. For single target, you want to stand at max range, precast the Frost Bomb whenever possible, and then DPS with the final spike of the Glacial Cascade for maximum damage. After killing the Devourer, engrave Frozen Locust as your level 2 gem and Concentrated Effect support for your Glacial Cascade. The Frozen Locust in combination with Glacial Cascade can be used to clear monsters while continuously moving in one direction by using Frozen Locust behind you and then hitting it with the Glacial Cascade on your way away from it. Make sure to carefully read the descriptions of the skills you use because many of them have built-in interactions, such as, for example, the final spike of Glacial Cascade automatically exploding the ice crystals spawned by the Frozen Locust. And if you don't understand these details, then you will end up losing out on speed and damage by using your skills and building your character in a suboptimal way. After killing the Witch Ariadne for your next support gem, you want to engrave Martial Tempo. You should use it in the Glacial Cascade for faster clear speed, or if you're about to fight a boss and rely on Tempest Bells for your damage, you can use it in the Quarterstaff Strike instead. And if you have at least 17 strength in your shield and weapon set at level 6, you can use your first level 3 gem to engrave the Shield Charge and use it immediately, or otherwise engrave the Tempest Bell and use the level 3 gem you get from the Lackland for Shield Charge instead. Any spare skill gems early on should be used to acquire 4 Tempest Bells as soon as you can, and after that upgrading your main damage dealing abilities. In order to craft 4 bells, you need to take out your other bells from the gem menu, engrave the new bell, and then put them all back in. Otherwise you will end up leveling up the old level 3 bell with your level 4 skill gem instead of crafting a separate level 4 bell. From a level 1 to 13 you're aiming for this setup: Quarterstaff Strike plus Rage plus Martial Tempo, Glacial Cascade plus Concentrated Effect plus Martial Tempo, because you can either have it for your auto attack or the Glacial Cascade depending whether you want to stack your bells faster for single target or clear faster. And then Frozen Locust plus Ice Bite plus Cold Infusion. We also use Frost Bomb for debuffing the single target enemies such as bosses or rares, and 3 to 4 Tempest Bells with Conduction, Glaciation, Ignition and Ruthless support, depending on how many supports you get early and how many int and strength supports you can fit in your limit, which depends on the attributes that you find on your gear. These supports in the bells help you to make your bell damage more consistent, but they are the last priority. And then we're also using Herald of Ice with a magnified effect. At the end of this section, I will also provide you with a full priority list for every single skill and support gem that we need to engrave, but for now let's move on to the level 14 transition. At level 14 you want to engrave Ice Strike from a level 5 gem that you get. This will be your main ability now. You can still keep the Glacial Cascade and Frozen Locust for Act 2, but eventually you will not have enough gem slots to run everything at the same time. So you will have to cut the Glacial Cascade first and then also replace the Frozen Locust with Leap Slam when you arrive at Dreadnought. For supports, you will start off with Rage and Martial Tempo being now exclusively socketed in the Ice Strike, and after you get rid of Frozen Locust, you can also use the Ice Bite instead of Rage, for example, and socket the Rage in one of your bells instead. This will improve your clear. Your single target combat pattern should now look like this. Pre-use the Frost Bomb and then Ice Strike the target 4 times, drop all 4 bells and hit the bells as well as your target with Ice Strike. Make sure to always have a source of cold, lightning and fire damage to apply all of the elemental ailments to your bells, because this will drastically increase your damage. Ice Strike will always ensure sufficient cold damage, and your passive tree or the first ascendancy nodes can guarantee always having lightning damage, but your added fire damage has to come from gear. So make sure to always keep either gloves or rings with added fire damage in case your weapon doesn't have it. Your clearing pattern depends on the monsters that you're fighting now. In general, try to use Ice Strike to dash a short distance toward the enemies ahead of you so that you can move through the zones a little bit faster while stacking the combo points and letting the monsters chase you. Once you group up a larger pack, you can drop the Tempest Bell and AoE them all down. And early on, before level 30, let's say, especially if you have enough skill gems to keep up your Frozen Locust levels, you can use it to quickly explode a pack of monsters by walking through it and then using the Frozen Locust inside in the middle of the pack. This will often cause it to detonate immediately, killing everything with Herald of Ice. After getting the guaranteed Jeweler's Orb from the Sunswept Marsh camp, you can use either Cold Infusion in your Ice Strike, or if you have a lot of flat fire and lightning damage, use Ice Bite and Rage instead together with the Martial Tempo. And as soon as you get a tier 2 support gem, you can add Primal Armament to your Ice Strike. So from level 14 to level 35, you're aiming for this setup. Ice Strike with Primal Armament, Martial Tempo, and then Ice Bite or Rage. Frozen Locust with Cold Infusion and then Ice Bite if you're not using it otherwise. Frost Bomb, still for debuffing the single target bosses. 4 Tempest Bells with Conduction, Glaciation, Ignition, and Ruthless, and also Rage if you're not using it in the Ice Strike. And then we're using Herald of Ice with Magnified Effect and Innervate, Shield Charge, and Leap Slam, which will replace the Frozen Locust. After clearing the Azak Bog and acquiring 60 Spirit and a guaranteed level 10 Spirit Gem, you can engrave the Combat Frenzy, and in combination with the Resonance Keystone, it will generate power charges whenever you freeze enemies, which can be used for a charged staff ability that grants you lightning damage buff. In order to fit these new skills, you will need to drop the Frost Bomb and one of the bells, but that's okay because our single target damage is going to just keep getting better and better from this point on. Your single target pattern is very similar to before, but try to keep the charged staff for boss fights by waiting until your power charges almost expire and then using it at the last second to extend the duration. After completing your second trial and getting the Unbound Avatar ability, you can also make sure to save it for the boss fights in areas where there is a boss present. Press it right after you drop the bells for a massive burst of damage. And the clearing pattern will also be similar to before, with the added task of keeping up your charge staff buff as much as you can. After clearing the Azak Bog the second time in Act 6, you can also engrave the Herald of Thunder, and I recommend saving a lower level Spirit Gem for it to make sure that you can meet the attribute requirements. We want to use both Heralds at the same time, which means that we will have to drop either the Leap Slam or the Shield Charge from your gems, so you can pick whichever one you prefer, and you're aiming for the following setup now. Ice Strike with Primal Armament, Martial Tempo, and Ice Bite, and you can also add Heft to it if you find the Greater Jeweler's Orb. Tempest Bell number 1 with Cold Exposure and Strip Away. These need to be 2 of them together. Then we have Tempest Bell number 2 with Rage and Font of Rage, and Tempest Bell number 3 with Heavy Swing and Close Combat. We also are going to run Charge Staff with Persistence for a longer buff duration and Arcane Tempo for a faster cast time, and ideally Shield Charge with Ingenuity for shorter cooldown. And then Combat Frenzy and our 2 Heralds, Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder. In Herald of Ice, you want Lightning Infusion, Conduction, and Magnified Effect, and then in Herald of Thunder, you want the Cold Infusion, Glaciation, and Innervate. So notice how the Heralds have seemingly the opposite supports socketed in them, because they need to be doing the opposite ailments. Our Herald of Ice needs to deal lightning damage and shock, and the Lightning Herald needs to deal cold damage and freeze, and this way the Heralds can chain from each other and give you incredibly good clearing ability. Follow this order when engraving your skill gems. Any spare skill gems can simply be used to boost the levels of your main damaging abilities. You want to prioritize Frozen Locust early on, and then you want to prioritize your Ice Strike and the bells. And this is the order in which you should engrave your support gems, and any support gems will serve to accelerate your support gem acquisition, so just move down the list and craft them in order as you get them, and also make sure to check your attribute limits in your skill gem menu to see that you can actually use the intelligence and strength support gems whenever you want to craft them. Now let's talk about gear, starting with weapons, which are by far the most important piece of gear on your character. On your staff, the most important modifiers are increased and flat physical damage, flat fire, lightning and cold damage, attack speed, and also bonus to levels of melee skills. Flat physical combined with the increased physical is the best combination for a weapon DPS, but you also need to make sure to always have a source of lightning and fire damage in order to shock and ignite your bells for much more damage. You can get that flat elemental damage from the weapon or a ring or glove prefixes, or from elemental runes socketed in your weapon. Attack speed is typically the best suffix to have, but you can also use the +2 levels of melee skills, but getting more than +2 extra levels on your skills will cause you to run into mana issues, so do not prioritize it unless you have a ton of mana and mana recovery on your gear. Most of the weapons you will use will be crafted by you rather than found, and you need to know which bases to craft on and when you get access to the next base so that you don't waste your currency right before getting access to a good upgrade opportunity. So at level 4 you get access to the long staff, which you should swap to as soon as possible and spend your first transmutations and alterations on. You can find refined arms scattered around a red veil, which drop a random level 4 weapon when clicked, and this is a great way to get an almost guaranteed white long staff early on. From level 11 you can use the Gothic quarterstaff. Before fighting Count Gionor at the end of Act 1, you should try to craft as good of a Gothic staff as you can, and you can spend a Regal Orb, Alchemy Orb, Artificer Orb, Elemental Runes, whatever you have, because this staff has to last you for quite a long time, because we're skipping the next base, which is the Crackling Quarterstaff. It's a lightning base and it doesn't let us freeze and shatter consistently, which makes it actually very bad for our build, so that's why we're skipping it. And then at level 20 we can use the Crescent Quarterstaff. If you are able to craft a really good Gothic in Act 1, you might not be able to easily get a Crescent that beats it, which is okay. Simply skip that one and focus on saving your currency for the level 28 base, which is the Steel Point Quarterstaff. A good Steel Point will carry you through the entire Act 3 and more, and it is worth spending your currency, including the Exalts and Blacksmith Whetstones, on it. Ideally you'd like to craft it right before Jamanra fight at the end of Act 2. And at level 33 you also get access to the Slicing Quarterstaff base, and if you weren't able to get a good steel point, then you can prioritize the Slicing Staff instead, and it is the last currently available base before we move on to the advanced versions of the quarterstaves available in the Cruel difficulty. So from Act 4 to Act 6 you can rely on the advanced versions of the exact same quarterstaff bases as you did in Act 1 to 3. And you'll most likely only need to craft a single decent staff in Act 4, which will carry you until the end of the campaign very easily. Make sure that your loot filter highlights the items mentioned in this guide, as well as the weapons and armor with quality and sockets on them, and you can salvage the quality items for quality increasing currency, and items with sockets get salvaged for Artificer Orb shards. If this is your first character and you haven't unlocked the salvage bench yet, save those items in your stash and then salvage them all later in Act 1 when you unlock the bench. You can get your loot filter from the filterblade.xyz, or you can check out my Patreon where I share my personal leveling filters as an option for Patreon supporters. The links are in the description. Apart from the stuff from the beginning of Act 1, you also need to be looking for a one-handed weapon with strength and a shield with strength or increased chance to block for your secondary weapon set. Ideally you want a hybrid base shield, because a pure armor shield slows you down by 3% when you have it out, while hybrid shield slows you only by 1.5%. We do this to start using the shield charge and leap slam as soon as possible. And one of our other main gear priorities are good boots. Prioritize them over other pieces of armor until you have movement speed on them. Here are the item level requirements for different movement speed bonuses so that you know when you can expect an upgrade. Of course, life attributes and resistances are always good to have on them, but you should highly prioritize the movement speed over every single other stat on them. And on the rest of your armor, you want to wear primarily evasion and evasion/energy shield items. You're going to be scaling evasion and some energy shield as your primary defensive stat, so make sure to wear decent bases that are close to your level. Life and evasion modifiers will give you the most defense. Resistances and attributes such as strength, dexterity, and intelligence on the suffixes are very desirable, but a good life regeneration modifier is also definitely not something to overlook, because getting a decent amount of life life regen will make you feel significantly more tanky, so it's not a bad modifier to have as well. And jewelry is the hardest to upgrade probably, as it drops in a very limited amount and it is not widely available at the vendor. So make sure to learn all of the guaranteed jewelry spots during the campaign to increase your chances at getting a decent piece of gear. You can get a guaranteed ring at the cemetery, you can get a guaranteed amulet at the Keth ruins, and then in Act 3 from the purple plant guy, you can get guaranteed resistance ring in bird shrines, and you can get guaranteed ring at the Sandswept Marsh at the hanging tree. On your jewelry, especially the rings, you want to make sure to prioritize flat added damage, especially fire, and then life resistances and attributes as with anything else. While you will find some gear upgrades along the way, you should definitely try to intelligently craft a lot of your gear to be stronger and tankier at all stages of leveling, and majority of your currency should be always spent on weapons. You should also always think about what you're trying to get from your transmutes and augmentations, so do not just throw them at every single item you have and be purposeful with them. For example, if you haven't found movement speed boots in the early game and you already have a decent weapon, you can spend your augmentations on boots with decent suffixes such as elemental resistances and an open prefix, so that you can fish for the movement speed prefix. And blue weapons with things like attack speed or +2 level of melee skills are probably the best target for your augmentation orbs early on. Always take stock of your gear and try to figure out what's your weakest piece. Whenever you have a little bit of downtime, just take a look at your gear and try to find what needs to be upgraded. Let's say you're level 28 and you haven't upgraded your chest piece since level 4. It's a great idea to pick up things like a white studded vest and throw some transmutes at them, and even a mediocre evasion roll and a life regeneration on a good base will be better than the most random rares that you found 20 levels ago. Be disciplined with your currency as well. For example, you should probably never exalt a piece of gear that isn't a quarterstaff unless you have at least 3 to 6 exalts, which will be enough for your next 1 or 2 weapon upgrades during the campaign. And same goes for regal orbs. If you have less than 2, you should not spend them on anything other than a weapon, and artificer's orbs if you have like less than 4 of them. So keep them for weapon upgrades and only spend the surplus on other items. The best targets for exalts will be probably things like rings, so you can get flat damage on them and resistances, and the best targets for artificer's orbs would be probably really good pieces of gear that will last you for a long time if you have things like body runes. If you get really lucky and drop a great weapon, this is a great opportunity to save your currency and not craft it any further if your damage is still very high. This will help you transition to the next weapon base much easier. So you can afford to save your currency whenever your character feels very strong, and you should spend more currency if your character feels very weak. While looking for gear at the vendor, you can press Ctrl F and Ctrl V to paste this string into the search bar. This will highlight items with flat added damage, strength, movement speed, maximum life, and increased chance to block, so that you can find them much easier. For permanent buffs, you can select the mana and a life flask recovery in the Valley of the Titans, but at some point after the campaign, when we're mapping in the endgame, it can be switched to the charm charges. And from Act 3 permanent buff that we get from Survey, I recommend the Elemental Ailment Threshold and the 5 to all attributes from the Act 6 version. Now let's go over the passive tree progression. So we're starting as monk, and initially we're pathing through here to flow like water, through the attack damage nodes, through the skill speed nodes, and picking up flow state early on. If you have already 2 items with strength, and you can use the shield charge and go ahead and path to the crushing wave. Otherwise, first pick up the strength. So we're going to be picking up strength from here, and this should be enough to equip your shield charge with a single piece of gear that has strength on it. So it could be a shield, could be a mace, or could be any other piece of gear. And after that, we're picking up the crushing wave for a huge amount of increased damage if we crit recently. Most of our skills have pretty high crit chance. The weapon has pretty high crit chance as the staff, so this will be up most of the time. Then we're pathing and we're picking 2 dexterity nodes, so this is important. Dexterity twice and then int once. After that, we're going through the elemental damage, and here is where we can start picking our weapon set passives. So we're gonna be using weapon set passive 1, which is going to be our staff, to pick up these elemental nodes. These are very important, and make sure to read them carefully. So if you ignited, or if you shocked, or if you chilled enemy recently, you get huge amount of increased damage, and this is another reason why we want that flat fire damage and flat lightning damage on our gear. And if you don't don't have the flat lightning damage, you can choose to also pick the essence of the storm nodes so that you guarantee the lightning damage. If you have some lightning damage on your gear, then this is not necessary. And then for weapon set 2, where we are using our shield, we're going to be picking some strength nodes. So the strength nodes here, I would select these 4 strength nodes. That's 20 strength that will be available when we have our shield out. This will help our requirements for the shield charge and later the leap slam. So that's for the weapon set passives for now. And then we're going to use the common passives. We're going to pick 1 dexterity node and then 1 intelligence node and path through here to the other dex and int step like mist, which is going to also give us the movement speed. So this will make your heralds very consistent. You will be freezing a lot and this will give you the movement speed. And after that, you either need a lot of dexterity and intelligence, so continue picking them up. You can pick up dex and int here and then path to the strength. And if you don't need it, then you can still prioritize the evasion and here shimmering, which will give you the extra movement speed whenever you have some energy shield. If you have 0 energy shield on your gear or like very little so that it's not going to be up, then you can skip this for later. But eventually you should have at least a couple of pieces of gear that have evasion and energy shield, and that will give you enough so that you have this extra movement speed guaranteed. After that, we are pathing to the evasion and energy shield and mindful awareness here. This will basically sort our defense. We will be closing in on level 30 here. We will be picking up slightly better bases, so this will be a huge amount of a defensive boost. After that, we're going for the attack damage here, and you can also pick up your dex from either this side, or you can pick up your dex from this side, depending on how early you get your spirit gem. Because I think level 8, level 9 spirit gem, if you get that, then you will be able to use them very early, but normally you get them level 10 from the Act 3 and you are starting to use them at level 36, which means you don't need to rush this. But typically it's a good idea to pick up resonance as soon as you can here so that it's ready for whenever you're going to be using the charge staff and combat frenzy. After that, we can path to the to this attribute as well, pick dexterity and intelligence, whichever you need depending on the gear, because you probably are going to have like at least 1 or 2 rolls on your gear, and even if you don't, you should still have enough. You might have to like wait 1 level or 2 levels to pick it up from the tree, but you should be keeping up with the skills as you go. And then we can also use weapon set passives to increase our damage when we have the staff out for our weapon set number 1, and then increase our defense when we have the shield out. So that's another weapon set passive thing that we can do here. After the resonance and picking up this core that will be available early on in the first half of the campaign, we're gonna start pathing down. So pathing down, we're gonna grab more dexterity and path here to harness the elements, and this gives us a huge damage boost. So at this point, our damage is starting to skyrocket. We have the increased freeze build up, then we have increased shock build up, and then we have increased damage for each type of elemental ailment on enemy. So we can have chill, we can have ignite, we can have shock, and this gives you 45% increased damage when you have all 3 on the target. After that, we're pathing here for the movement speed and evasion. This will give you some extra defensive boost and mobility. Then we are pathing to the catalysis, which gives you the physical damage reduction because your resistances are starting to take it. We don't really have any armor on our gear, so this will immediately be beneficial because you should have some decent resistances already on your gear. Then we start pathing to the exploit, which is increased damage with hits against enemies that have elemental ailments on them. And it also increases the duration of your ailments. And we start picking up the jewel sockets. So make sure anytime you're in Act 2 and you have the Galeria and Keth where you can kill the big scarab, he has a guaranteed jewel drop. Make sure to get the jewels. And even if the jewels drop with like useless stats that you cannot use, save your Val orbs for these jewels and corrupt them, because they can roll on an implicit, something like increased attributes or resistances, and then you socket that and at least you're getting something rather than nothing from this jewel slot here. After that, we're picking up the movement speed and attack damage plus maim, so we're going to be slowing enemies a lot with the maim and chill. And then after that, we're pathing through another jewel socket to our evasion and energy shield node with some reduced effect of curses and attack speed, and that is basically the whole tree when it comes to just a generic passive. So that's basically a tree that you should end up with at the end of the campaign. And now let's look also at the ascendancy nodes, which are very, very simple. We're simply picking the the shock and lightning damage early on to guarantee always having lightning damage no matter what. And then we're picking the Unbound Avatar for extra single target damage, which can be used to basically burst a target down in a split second. As a final thing, I have an extra surprise for you. I have turned this guide into a written version, which can be found on Mobalytics. It has all of the gem setups, the gear explanation, the passive tree progression, so you can click on the link in the description and you will get all of this information in a written format. And if you'd like to see the leveling guide in action, I've also uploaded my full Act 6 run on a monk using this exact strategy, so you can watch the whole run and see exactly how to level 2 maps in a fast and efficient way. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and click like if you learned something in this video, and I will see you next time. Take care, bye bye.